Bruce Feldman covers college football for a long time. Over 25 years, New York Times best-selling author, Fox Sports. Recent articles all over college football. So let's start with Marcus Freeman. I said this earlier, I didn't think Harbaugh had a great roster until last year. He won 10 games early in his career, but I mean a roster I felt could go toe-to-toe with maybe anybody but Georgia. I thought Brian Kelly 3 years ago finally had a roster, 10 years in, that could go toe-to-toe with Georgia. Didn't beat them, but they had a lot of NFL guys. You know, this is hard. Marcus Freeman's never been a head coach. What are realistic expectations with this roster, in your opinion, Bruce?
Well, you got to remember, Colin, your starting quarterback, Tyler Buckner, he's out for the season. It's a team without a lot of firepower. I mean, they are really thin at wide receiver. They have a good tight end. But beyond that, they don't have great receivers. They don't have great running backs. Remember Kyron Williams, who was a really good back for them the last few years, great all-around back. He's in the NFL now. So you're talking about a backup quarterback, limited firepower. I think it's going to be a stretch for them to get to 8 wins.
Wow.
I mean, it's not like they were playing in the SEC, but I still think this is right now maybe a 7-5, maybe even a 6-6 team. He's got to upgrade the roster. I mean, they've had some good athletes on defense in this run under Brian Kelly. It was better than what it was before, but I don't think they just do not have enough big-time athletes. They certainly have had a good run of tight ends and great offensive linemen, but the offense has been too limited. And you're not going to win. You're not going to compete and win national titles if you don't have the firepower on offense.
Listen, I'll tell you a team that's interesting. There's a consensus among a lot of people that, hey, Michigan beat Ohio State last year, but Ohio State will come back in Columbus, thump them, and we'll get the order back in. And I watch Michigan, and I'm like, I don't know, Bruce. They got a lot of NFL bodies. They finally have a quarterback with an arm that can spin it. You're going to see him this weekend. I don't know. Michigan looks like they can go toe-to-toe. Again, maybe not Georgia. I think they can go toe-to-toe with Ohio State. That's the eye test I see. What do you see?
I'm very curious to get them in person. They haven't played anybody so far. It's about as impressive as you can look when you play teams that are like a combined 2-9, Colin. But as you said, a little different now. J.J. McCarthy is a better runner than Caden McNamara, bigger arm. He has been really sharp. He's completing well over 80% of his passes so far. The other thing that I think really helps them is they won the Big Ten championship last year without Ronnie Bell, who is their best receiver. He's back. The receiving core is much deeper. They have speed in the backfield with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. They're a dangerous team, especially if he keeps playing the way he's looked. Now, defensively, they don't have, obviously, Aiden Hutchinson. They lost 7 starters, but they do have a lot of athletes on that side of the ball. Mozzie Smith in the middle of the defensive line, 6'4", about 340, was the number 1 guy on our freaks list this season. Junior Colson is a potential All-American at linebacker. I think they got enough athletes over there. To me, what's really interesting, having spent some time around the Michigan players and the staff going into the fall camp, was they really felt like, hey, everybody thought last year was a fluke, that we beat the Buckeyes. It was snowy. They were down. It was just awkward. They feel like there was nothing fluky about it. They have as big a chip on their shoulder now, having beaten them, as I think that group did last year, because people said you couldn't beat them. Now it's like people are saying it was a fluke. I think this is a really, really interesting team to watch going forward.
Yeah, and I think you hit it early. This quarterback can really throw it. This is a real offense now. Anybody surprised by Lincoln Riley, how fast they have been viable? I still contend they've got one NFL guy on defense in the front 7. There'll be limitations down the road that you'll see. But offensively, Bruce, they do everything well. They block, they protect. Anybody that you talk to that's gone, that's better than I thought, faster than I thought.
I think they're trying to keep the hype in check a little bit, and it's already kind of out of the barn. But you know, the things that have stood out, and I heard this from the guys inside, on the staff this summer, was Caleb Williams has grown a lot from year 1 with Lincoln Riley. I mean, his feet are settled down. His eyes are more settled down. He's much more in command. Getting Jordan Addison late was a huge addition because they already had a good group of skill guys. Now, I don't want to say it's a great group, but it's really impressive. They are deep with a lot of playmakers outside. He's getting the ball out. The part where I'm like hesitant to go in on any of the USC is back talk is what you said. They were horrible on defense last year. They didn't bring in, Jordan Addison and Caleb Williams on the defensive side of the ball. And if you watch the game a couple of weeks ago against Stanford, if they don't have some turnovers in the red zone, I think that game is like a 63-55 kind of game. It's Stanford. We're not talking about like they were going up against Ohio State. So you look at the Pac-12, I think the Pac-12 is a little better.
Yeah.
The defense is the part that gives me pause right now.
So there is more than a few voices in college football have said Georgia has passed Alabama. You got to be cautious about that. Although I will say, defensively, the last couple years, you just look at who's getting drafted. They've looked a little faster to me. They've had a more consistent pass rush, it feels like to me, the last couple years. Saban. What do you make of that talk, though, about Georgia has just edged ahead of Bama?
I would be careful to go too far on that front right now. I mean, Stetson Bennett's been terrific. He deserves some Heisman chatter. I still think Bryce Young is a better quarterback. Yeah. And I would look at this and say a couple of years ago, and I remember it was literally the day of the national title game, I did some radio shows and people were talking about Clemson was going to play LSU. And people were starting to say, if Dabo wins this, he's probably the top guy in college football. Well, obviously Dabo didn't win it. LSU beat them. And you look at it right now, and I'm hesitant to write anybody passing by Nick Saban. You win one national title, that's great. I think Georgia looks really impressive. It's too early to say that. Let me see what happens in January before I'm talking about Georgia, Trump, being on top of where Alabama's at.
All right, so not all great brands last forever. I'm old enough to remember when Oregon State basketball had Ralph Miller, and for 15 years, they weren't UCLA and wouldn't, but they were a great program, and they no longer are. And I look at Nebraska, and I think they're in the wrong conference. They've gone through a bunch of coaches. Scott Frost was great at Central Florida. Now I'm supposed to believe he forgot how to coach. How good of a coach can they get? I mean, how are they viewed in college football now?
Well, let's start with the Scott Frost part is to me interesting because he was great at UCF. But keep in mind, he took over for George O'Leary, who was a hard-edged kind of kept people like it was almost wrapped too tight. Scott Frost went in there, was a looser guy. The staff was looser. They responded to that. When he took over at Nebraska, it was a different dynamic. It was too loose then, too lax. They had organizational issues, and so they never reined it in. And they didn't recruit well enough to give them much of a margin for error. Right now, I think there's some positives is you have a program with a ton of history and really good facilities, and they do have an NIL war chest to spend a lot of money on that part of it. Yeah. The downside is the recruiting base is not very good, and it certainly hasn't gotten better, since, there's not going to be kids you're going to recruit who go, yeah, I remember when Tommy Frazier was the star. I remember, it's too long ago, right? And so I think, it could help them if they're not going to be in the easier side of the Big Ten, if they go just, that was an easier thing to say, hey, you don't have Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State on our side. At some point soon, I think there are not going to be divisions there. So you will get the Big Ten TV money. But to me, from everything I've heard in the last, 2 weeks as this search shapes up, Nebraska is really interested in three leading candidates. One is Matt Campbell at Iowa State, done a terrific job in Ames, established a really winning culture, and he really knows how to develop players. Lance Leipold, who's a former Nebraska assistant, won a bunch of D3 national titles, and now has done a remarkable job at Kansas. I mean, Kansas is 3-0 for the first time in 13 years. The other one to watch is Bill O'Brien, the OC at Alabama. From what I'm hearing, Trevor Alberts really likes him. They go way back, some 20 years, and he was very impressed with what he did taking over in that dark time at Penn State in the wake of the Jerry Sandusky scandal. And Trevor Alberts knows there needs to be a major overhaul on Nebraska football. So I think that's something that he's really weighing in his head, but there's a long time now before they actually make make a head coaching hire and see who really wants that job. I'm not sure Matt Campbell wants to make that move to Lincoln, Nebraska.
That'd be the guy I'd hire. I think he's done a great job. He's found 2- and 3-star recruits and made them NFL players. I think that guy is. That's what you need in Nebraska. You're not beating Alabama, Ohio State for 5-star guys that often. Bruce Feldman, Fox Sports college football reporter. He crushed it as usual. Great seeing you, Bruce.
Always a pleasure, Colin. Thanks for having me.
By the way, Bruce, also, when everybody else said Quinn Ewers, the quarterback at Texas, would be out for a month and a half, Feldman said a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. Reportedly now, Sark says Quinn and Ewers will suit up against Texas Tech. So Bruce was right. That kid's an interesting prospect. 5-star quarterback, big arm.
Who do the Texans? Who do the Texas Longhorns have on the sideline? Mr. Miyagi healing guys that quickly? What the heck is that?
That's the way it worked.
That quickly?
Well, I mean, all these guys.
Jeez.
I just saw a story on Trey Lance. They're like broken ankle. He'll be throwing by November. Dak Prescott's now going to be back.
He's barely going to be walking by November.
Well, I just think young bodies, nutritional standards are up. Everybody now is getting healthy fast. Whenever I see 6 weeks, I immediately think 3 to 4.
Well, Zach Wilson, we're still waiting. We're still waiting on Zach Wilson.
What's the story on that?
Well, if Flacco beats the Bengals this weekend, I don't think we're seeing Zach Wilson week 4.
Oh, give me a break.
You don't think they have any chance to beat the Bengals this weekend? They beat them with Mike White last year, Colin.
No, I'm saying, if Flacco wins and Zach Wilson was held, we got to go. That's my lead story tomorrow.
We're leading with that tomorrow.
You don't think I can't? I'm not even going to go.
Quarterback controversy in New York.
I'm not taking the bait. We'll see you tomorrow in LA. It's the Herd. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.